just want to introduce you to Manish Mishra Marzetti, ladies and gentlemen. Passport!
It's 1993. I'm 22 years old, and I am so excited because I have my first real job as a young adult. And it's an important job, too. I am a diplomat. I am working for the US State Department in the Middle East at one of our embassies, and I am in charge of immigration and passports and visas. And it is all very exciting and fun, except on this particular day, at this particular moment, I've got an Indian gentleman and his family on the other side of bulletproof double-pane glass, and he's yelling at me. What gives you the right? What gives you the right to deny me and my family the opportunity to go to the United States when you and your family had exactly that same opportunity? Why? Why are you slamming the door shut behind you? It's a poignant moment. It takes me to my own family's immigration story. My dad had shared with me when I was a kid that in the late 1960s he came over to the US for the first time from the UK by ship, supported and encouraged by an employer in Western Pennsylvania who wanted him to make that immigration journey. And soon after he did, my mom got to make that journey too. That whole experience was encouraged and supported in so many ways, and it was so different than what this gentleman on the other side of this bulletproof glass was experiencing. And as I was sitting with that, I'm feeling this dissonance, this frustration. I have become a gatekeeper, an enforcer for immigration laws that are piecemeal and haphazard and don't even make sense to me. And at the same time, I didn't write those laws. I'm here doing a job, and I'm a little bit indignant about getting yelled at. So I press the pause button on that internal dissonance and that frustration, and I wave this man and his family on, and I move on to my next clients. 2 decades later, it's 2015, and I'm no longer a diplomat. If you can imagine, I've chosen an even more idealistic profession than being a diplomat. I am now a clergy person, and I'm a minister in the Unitarian Universalist denomination. And if you've seen that television show, Modern Family, I'm kind of living my own real-life version of Modern Family. I've got a husband, Jeff, who's here tonight. He's white. And we've got 2 adopted African-American children. They've been with us since birth. At that point in time, our son, Jason, is 4 years old, and our daughter, Mina, is 1 year old. And we are looking for a community, for a congregation that will embrace this modern family for all of who we are. And in that searching, we look towards Massachusetts, which makes a lot of sense. Massachusetts was the birthplace of the marriage equality movement. People there fought for the rights and the dignity of families just like ours. World-class education institutions, which we wanted for our children, conversations about multiculturalism and diversity. It made so much sense. So we move to the Boston suburbs to serve a congregation there. And these suburbs are affluent and almost exclusively white. And when we say in American society, we have these conversations about the top 1%, this is that kind of area, and even more so, there are many people who would even be the top 0.5%. So we are moving in. The church there has a little house kind of behind the church. It's a little attachment, and it's modest, nothing fancy. It's made out of cinder block, but it's got 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and we had been living in a tiny little apartment, so we're moving on up. This is all very exciting for us. And as we're getting to know this new environs, this new town, you discover that an entire part of this suburban town that actually faces the more diverse parts of Boston, it is separated from that by a moat. It's actually a water reservoir, but it's got like this tiny little road across this long body of water, 2-lane road. And it just strikes me in my psyche as like a barrier, a separation, a moat. As we drive around the actual neighborhoods of this suburban town, there are some historic farms. There are also fairly affluent and beautiful and elegant homes that would probably be in an architectural digest constructed by world-famous architects and designers, no doubt. And those beautiful homes have next to them what we call like a carriage house or an in-law apartment, the little house next to the big house where visitors might stay or where people who work at the larger home might live. And those little attachments, they kind of are the same size and scope of the house behind the church where me and my family are living. And I find myself just beginning to wonder a little bit. I wonder what our relationship to this town, I wonder what our relationship to this community is going to be like. That starts to become clearer soon enough. I have found in my time as a clergy person that in the towns and cities where I have lived, I am always highly regarded as a spiritual leader, as a moral and civic, as a public leader too. And that is all true in this setting as well. But there's a difference. There's a difference in the quality, tone, vibe, and energy of the relationship that I am trying to figure out. And it has something to do with the fact that we did not buy property and move into this town. We are in this town by virtue of being invited in as staff, on par with the town librarian or the town police chief, well-regarded people, but they are there as staff to serve the people who have earned the ability to live in this town or historically have been in this town. And that version of being on staff at times taken to its extreme feels to me like being the help. I have never encountered this before in any other ministerial setting in which I have served, and it's different, and it's a little bit challenging. But I tell myself, we came here in part for the kids, to give them opportunities that might not exist in other places, so I'll manage my ego. I'm an adult. I'm the one who can work with that and figure out what I need to do with that. We're here for our kids. That piece of the puzzle begins to also become a little bit clearer pretty quickly. In those early days as we are settling in, my kids are like any other kids. They want to play and go out to playgrounds and experience the town. And so we go as a family to one of the town playgrounds early in our time there. And there are a bunch of town kids, no surprise, predominantly white, already on the playground by the swings, and that's what my kids love. They love being on the swings, so they make a beeline straight for those swings. And as they do, and they try to interact a little bit with the kids that are already there, you can feel the energy on the playground just shift and change a bit. There's a feeling of hesitancy. There's a feeling of concern, worry, maybe even fear. And those kids that were already there, without any discussion or anything verbal needing to be said, just kind of subconsciously arrive at their own collective decision that they are going to migrate to the other end of the playground, away from our children and our family, and just cede the swings to us. I wanted to believe that this was an aberration, that we're just new in town, people don't know us yet, and so they're seeing new faces that they don't know. This will surely get better over time. This is not what's going to continue to happen. And yet, as weeks and months wore on, my husband and I witnessed the same thing occurring over and over and over again. Which is why about a year into living in this suburban town, there was an event that was being held that we were invited to, specifically for newcomers, people who had recently moved into town. I was excited about this because while my children were going through some version of isolation and perhaps loneliness, I was too. And so I figured if we could go to this event that's designed for newcomers, I'll get to meet other adults who are new to town. They may not know people yet. They may be looking for friends. They may have children who don't know other children yet. This is very exciting to me. I'm looking for an opportunity like this. And so we go to this welcoming event. And while I'm there, I meet a mom, a white mom. Her and her family had just moved into town. They bought a house. And they have kids exactly the same ages as our kids. And we're getting to know one another. I'm sharing stuff about my life with her, her with me. And as we're talking and getting acquainted, another white mom walks into this part of this house where this event is, and she makes a beeline straight for us and places herself into this conversation, excitedly turning to her peer to have conversation with her. And she says, I am so glad to finally meet you. We heard that you and your family were moving into town, and well, now you're here. And you know what? I have a son who's the same age as your child, and there is a play group that he is a part of, and we've reserved a spot in that play group for your child. And before you leave tonight, I just want to make sure that we exchange cell numbers and email addresses, because we're going to connect you up and get you to know everybody that you need to know and get you fully settled in. And I'm thinking, nobody did that when we moved in. But I am undeterred. I'm willing to make some effort. So I offer into this conversation, I say, you know, we've got kids those ages too. And these two women turn and look at me. I have spoken out of turn. They stare at me in silence for 10, 12 seconds. And then they go back to looking at one another and having the conversation that they were having, as if I have said nothing, as if I'm not even there. It took me back to that Indian gentleman, that experience that I never forgot since it happened. And I, in that moment, was now on the other side of the double-plated, bulletproof glass, looking in at this thing that I wanted to be a part of and not finding and seeing any way to break through that barrier. It was a cause of deep pain and confusion for me. Some months later, even as I continued to wrestle with my own internal feelings and sense of all of this, my son was coming home at the end of his preschool year. It had been a photo day at his school, and he got off that bus and he was crying, and he was really so distressed that he couldn't even talk about whatever it was that he had experienced or been through. And it took several hours. It was later in the evening that my husband and I finally got him calm enough that he could speak about whatever was going on. And he kept using a phrase that didn't make any sense to me at all. I didn't understand what he was trying to say. He kept saying over and over again, "Poopy handsome, poopy handsome. I want to be poopy handsome." And I said to him, "Jason, can you find some other words, some other way to talk about what it is you're trying to say?" And my little boy looks at his arm and he points to his skin and he says, "Poopy handsome. I want to be poopy handsome." He's trying to say he wants to be a little black boy, a brown-skinned boy who is handsome. And I know in that moment that in our household we have never referred to skin tone, color, difference in any kind of derogatory way like this. We have never done anything except tell our children that they are inherently worthy and beautiful and loved. And I know that something has happened at school that day in connection with that photo day that had just happened. Some peer, more likely than not, has said something like this to my son that has wounded him. And my heart sinks to the floor. Because I know that this pain that I now know so profoundly that my children are going through is because we moved to these suburbs for my job. I feel like I have failed my family. And ministers don't just change jobs. We don't just change churches every 2 or 3 years. It's not typically done. And so I feel stuck, and I feel like a professional failure too. I feel like somehow I should have known. Somehow I should have been able to see or discern that this was not the place that was going to embrace us as a family in the ways that we needed to be embraced and held. As we were sitting and with all of these feelings, and we had figured out, we'd begun to understand that we needed to take time away from these suburbs and go to more diverse locations when we could. And so we planned summer times when the children were not in school to be in other places that were more diverse. And we were coming back from exactly that type of summer vacation with the kids, switching planes, waiting for a connection back to Boston and New York City. And my son in the airport lounge was curled up in a fetal position in my husband's lap, and he just kept bawling and saying over and over again, I don't want to go back to Boston. I don't want to go back there. I hate living there. Do we have to go back? Why do we have to go back? And my little boy was verbalizing, he was articulating the thing that I was also feeling and couldn't bring myself to say out loud out of guilt and shame. I didn't like living there either. I also wanted to leave and never return, but I didn't know what to do about that. Sometime later, holding that guilt and shame, I approached my husband with a lot of fear and worry. And I shared with him that I think that we should leave. And I don't know how, and I don't know what that means. And maybe that means leaving the ministry altogether. I don't know. I don't know what comes next, but I see harm being done. And my husband's response in that moment, I didn't know how much I needed the response that he gave, but it was amazing. He said to me, I see and have experienced everything that you're talking about. And I too think we should leave. I don't like living here either. And you know what? None of us know what's going to come next, where we're going to be, what that's going to look like. But we will be together. We will be together as a family. And we will figure out whatever that is, the thing that comes next. We will figure that out. And his response changed that guilt and shame into courage and into the decision that we were, in fact, going to leave, and we were going to keep looking until we found the place where we could be exactly who each and every one of us in our family is, a place where we could thrive. And that decision led us to you. We've only been in Michigan 3 months. I'm still a congregational minister, and I found a community and a congregation in Ann Arbor that so deeply values inclusivity and diversity. It is not an intellectual commitment or an intellectual conversation. It is embodied in the fabric of this community and how they gather and who they are. That is the community that I am with and we are with as a family in Ann Arbor. 3 weeks ago, my husband, who's an artist, he was in an art show. My little girl, Mina, she's now 4.5. She likes to dance. She could easily be up here one of these days with these beautiful youngsters that we saw earlier. She's doing creative dance in a creative dance class, and she's been invited to be part of a recital. She'll be the youngest one in it, honoring Black History Month in February. And my son, my shy and deeply gentle 7-year-old son, who's so reserved and quiet and also so loving, he's made a friend already in his first grade class. This petite, slight little white girl who, if in another place, could have been afraid of him, might have even learned to be afraid of him. But this little girl, and I've seen the photos of this, she reaches out with her hand and takes his and introduces him to children that he doesn't know, brings him over and includes him in activities and explains what's going on. This amazing little girl who brings alive this simple truth, these barriers we create to separate us from one another, which include things like passports and walls, cause so much pain when all we're really looking for, all our hearts are really yearning for, is that simple act of reaching out with love and grasping the hand of another and letting them know and feel that they matter and that they are included and they are fully human. It is a joy to be in a place where we have found that.
Manish Mishra Marzetti.